I am Melissa Sassy, and I'm going to just share my screen real quick so that you can see who's on our panel. So this is panel 4. It's frameworks and ecosystem for community engagement and integration. And I am the chief penguin of IBMZ. I know many of you are thinking, wait a second. Yes, I created my own job title. And yes, I created my own job. Which is something that I've had a wonderful opportunity to do at IBM. I'm the global head and the founder of our IBM Hyperprotect Accelerator, which is a startup accelerator that's all about building and scaling startups and really working hand in hand to build a community, to foster a community, to nurture a community where in many ways we are increasing access to essential services in fintech, health tech, insurtech, ed tech, and I have the wonderful opportunity of working with a celebrity founder in my program, Timbaland. For those of you who are music buffs, he is one of the, he is a founder of Beat Club, and they're all about democratizing access to produce music, gain access to rights, and really connecting your bedroom producer, your basement producer, with record labels and big brands and all kinds of stuff. So what does all of that stuff have to do with connectivity, about digital inclusion, about community? Everything, because without enabling ecosystems, without solutions that people want to use, whether that's in fintech, health tech, whatever, what are we going to make and do and create, through our access? I have 4 amazing women, as I mentioned, on our panel today. I'm going to start off with Samar. So maybe Samar, if you could introduce how you fit into the world. Obviously, I know because we work on the same team at IBM, and she is no stranger to IEEE. So Samar, over to you to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Samar. I'm originally an applied mathematics engineer. I work with IBM in the student experience and entrepreneur experience team. We work with students from all over the world and entrepreneurs from all over the world to scale up their skills in tech through IBMZ Global Student Hub. I am a member with IEEE since 7 years now, and nice to meet you all. I work with Melissa. She used to be my manager. She's still the head of the department, and I'm so glad to work with her. Nice to meet you all, and I hope you will have a great time with us.
What you're going to hear a lot about today from Samar is about the community engagement that she has currently, and also the community engagement that she's created in her past life. She was part of receiving a grant from the IEEE and creating a digital skill building program for young people in Tunisia, and she's really all about community engagement and community development. Speaking of community, one of my favorite people on the planet, and I know everybody's thinking, oh, I don't know who that is because you told me I'm the favorite person. So Kelly, I'd love you to introduce how you fit in the world. Kelly is just one of the brightest young women that I've met in a very, very long time. And anytime I have an opportunity to collaborate with her and her community, I'm all over it. So Kelly, please share how you fit into the world.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and I'm so grateful to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly. My passion is bridging opportunity gaps to prepare young people for the future economy. So I've spent nearly the last decade focused on youth upskill and youth-led innovation programs that introduce young people to emerging technologies, how to solve global challenges like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and essentially become career ready so they can use their bright minds to build a better world.
Awesome, super. One of Kelly's amazing accolades among many is the fact that she created this Youth General Assembly that sits side by side with the UN General Assembly. And it has been all about bringing, youth to the center of things. She's taught me a lot about how to make sure that you're creating solutions and programs that drive outcomes and impact specifically for young people. And she often reminds me, whether she knows it or not, and whenever she's not in the room, it's still there, like a little bird on my shoulder telling me, hey, look around the room, do you have, youth representation here? And is that young person in a position of power? Does that young person have an opportunity to speak, have his or her or their voice heard? And are you enabling them, empowering them, to be their best selves? So now thinking about, inclusion, or thinking about community in a different framework, I'd like to welcome Deborah to introduce herself. I think that, one of the amazing things that, I've seen from Deborah is, not only her work on including people with disabilities or, accessibility needs, but really being a voice for everyone, and making sure that the times when we don't realize we're forgetting something, when we don't realize we're excluding someone, she's there to remind us in a way where we don't feel called out. We don't feel like, oh, I'm in trouble. I'm in the principal's office, but really doing so in a way where you learn and you improve, because we always get it wrong. Even when our intentions are good, we get it wrong. So Deborah, if you could share a little bit more about yourself.
But what a wonderful introduction, Melissa. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on the panel. I been a fan, obviously, of IEEE and that amazing work they're doing all over the world for many years. And also, I just loved Kelly's comments and Sahar's comments too, because we are all stronger together. And I think you're right, Melissa, we don't get it right, but we need to make sure that we are including everyone at this time when we're ripping apart the world to see what we could do better, hopefully. And that means we're always looking at it from all the different intersections. As Kelly said, are you meaningfully including youth? Are you meaningfully including, or just saying, oh, yo, young people, just be quiet? Are you meaningfully including them? But at the same time, we have to look at all the intersections. Are you meaningfully including youth with disabilities? Are you meaningfully including women, youth with disabilities, Black and brown, LGBT? So looking at all of the intersections, and often when we're talking about it from the lens of the SDGs, or, what is true inclusion? What is digital inclusion? All people have to be included. And that means technology has to be accessible. Content has to be accessible. And when we make things accessible, it improves the experience for all of the human beings. So I'm here just to remind everyone that people with disabilities that are 1.3 billion minimum, that we also want to participate. I'm proud to identify as a person with a disability. I'm neurodiverse. I have ADHD, which has been wonderful for my career and intense for my personal life. But I also am the mother of a daughter that's 34 years old with Down syndrome, and she is so amazing. And then sadly, my husband has aged into dementia because he was hit by a car when he was a child. And if we batter our brain enough, it will go into dementia in the future. So what does that mean? Does it mean my family's broken, or we just normal, regular human beings here that have something to offer to the world that society lets us participate? So thank you, Melissa.
Awesome. Thank you, Deborah. And thank you for sharing, your, what you face in your life, whether that's excuse me, you and your life, your life at home with your husband and your child. This year is the first time that I came out and said that I have ADHD, and I always knew that, I was all over the place sometimes, and I always knew that I had all these ideas coming in and out of my brain, and sometimes I would forget my keys when meanwhile they're in my hand. But I've got these great, amazing ideas, and I've got 3 million of them, and they, kind of flying around all over everywhere. And I think this year is when I've seen a lot of people speak up and talk about neurodiversity. And, it's not only made me feel more included, but it's also given me the ability to speak up about the things that are hard for me, the things that are easy for me. And also recognize when, I need to take a step back and, do things a different way or interact with others in a different way. So thank you for being part of a movement to enable, people in the community to be able to speak up about what makes them different. Now, with that, Jane, one of the amazing things that I've really enjoyed about Jane in her career is, you know, whether it's an internet governance conference, internet governance forum conference, or IEEE conference, or anything going on with Internet Society, anything, internet inclusion or community networks. Jane is always the first name that pops into my head, and she's I've always looked up to Jane and her work, what she's accomplished, but also how approachable and knowledgeable and how open she is to really connect me and others to the people she knows. And I see that as, how does she take her community and make it your community? With that, Jane, if you could share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Melissa. My name is Jane Coffin. I'm the Senior Vice President at the Internet Society. That's not the important point. The important point is that I work with an amazing group of people around the world and communities at the intersection of technology, policy, and development. I've spent time in government, industry, and now with ISOC, Internet Society, for over 10 years, on the technical issues of building infrastructure in communities to build more of a bigger, better internet. I focus on community networks, internet exchange points, and measuring the health of the internet, kind of streams of work. But the most important thing there is that the people who behind that on our staff and around the world and building a bigger community, as Melissa said, which is reaching out to people and figuring out who you can bring in and include to help build networks, whether it's a Wi-Fi based network, wireless, fiber in many places still, of course. We work in many rural, remote, and underserved urban areas around the planet. And as Melissa said, it's all about sometimes the people, because if you don't have people building those networks out and creating sustainability at the local level, you don't have a network. I often say the human nets build the nets when I'm tweeting. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to the panel.
Thank you, Jane. And also, thank you for a lot of the amazing insights that I was able to utilize in I don't know if you know that I mentioned you and your work in my dissertation that enabled me to call myself Dr. Sassy today. So lots of reports went into, my research, which is all about the digital inclusion of underserved and underrepresented communities and the tie that access, skills, and utilization of tech play when it comes to driving outcomes. And that's education, economic opportunity, healthcare outcomes, whatever. And we would not be able to do that without having access to really what I would consider locally focused content that is in local languages and including the right local people. So what I'm going to do, we've already kind of kicked off on introductions. We've talked a little bit about ourselves, so where each of us are coming from, our background. What I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with, I'm going to share a little bit about why digital inclusion matters to me, and I'm also going to share a little bit about kind of how I've included, or I've thought about my community and really creating solutions that are appropriate for the local community. So for me, I became inspired by my daughter, who did not have access to computers in her classroom. And I went about getting some computers for her classroom. I was working at Microsoft at the time, and at that time, it was really about, how do I get these 30 computers into my daughter's classroom? And what snowballed from there is realizing, like, wait a second, this is a big, wicked problem where 50% of the world doesn't have access to the internet. And in communities where it is there, in many cases, it's not relevant or it's not affordable. So how do we kind of think about the right kind of, solutions? And again, I kind of thought about my daughter first off. Fast forward, ended up sending 400 computers to 20 schools across the country and created a digital skills movement. And really got to know what was digital inclusion for local Tunisians. And I realized that it would be nothing without having it be youth-led, youth-run, and run by the local community, not by me making all the decisions, not by me doing everything, but really empowering them and serving as their mentor. And for me at that time, access to the internet and digital skills was my access to being a mother. And for those of you who don't know, my children and I were victims of parental kidnapping, and my children were taken away from me, more than 10 years ago. And I did not get my children back until one of them just recently came back in the last few months. Those of you who are familiar with my story, you may not know that I do have one back, and currently my access to the other two is through digital means. So when I think about what does access to the internet mean for me and my family, and it's being a mother. And I know that sounds a little bit wonky, because when you hear about access to the internet, you think about, wow, it's a job, it's education, it's opportunity. For me, it's motherhood. So that brings it to a very special place in my heart that made it kind of my life's work. I know that's really hard to go after, after that, that story, but I'd love to pass it over to you, Deborah, and I'd love to understand, from your perspective, what does internet inclusion mean to you, and how do you go about kind of thinking about that aspect of inclusion? And I know I'm kind of modifying the questions a little bit, so roll with the punches, y'all.
Well, first of all, I am so sorry that you walked that. I can't even imagine how hard that is over and over and over again. So I thought that was a powerful story, Melissa, because what does the internet mean to us? Are we willing to fight to make sure that we have a net neutral, internet, that we really have access to the internet? I think it's worth fighting for personally. And I agree that is a very powerful story. So, but digital access, it means so much. And, I am, and we were talking about it before we went on air, I'm joining from Virginia, right outside Richmond, Virginia, not very far away from Washington, D.C. And yet I am one of the 163 million Americans that don't have access to high-speed, reliable internet. And why does that matter? Well, it matters so very much. Melissa gave you a very powerful reason why it matters, but also people with disabilities and people that are aging into disabilities, because the reality is we have these biological bodies that, they break down. Sometimes we go blind, sometimes we go deaf, sometimes like my daughter, you're born with Down syndrome, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't add value. I remember when Sarah was born, my first child, the response was such tragedy. Me giving birth to a daughter is not a tragedy. My daughter's amazing. She has so much to give the world, just like everybody else, but she has some things she's better at than others, like everybody else. But what does digital inclusion really mean to this community, the 1.3 billion people in the world? We believe those numbers are very underestimated, but at the same time, what does it mean to really bring our true selves into everything we do? Our true selves. I have lived experiences as a woman. I have lived experiences as a white woman. So how do I have lived experiences growing up in the United States, in a developed country. So I have lived experience as a mother, as a wife. I have a lot of lived experiences. And these lived experiences can add great value to society and to the workforce. But we need to make sure that we allow everybody to join, regardless of who they are. I remember when I was a young woman, I kept being told to shut up and sit down and let the adults talk. Well, I actually want to hear from the young people, because I think the young people seem to have a better grasp on what's happening sometimes than people my age do. And I think baby boomers, need to be living a much better legacy than we're doing, but we need to leave a legacy of true inclusion. So if we want to meet the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals, 11 of those impact people with disabilities. I really believe all 17 of them do, but we have to look at all the intersections of this as well. We need to design technology that works for human beings. And I know that's such a silly thing to say, but we're not. We keep designing technology that's not accessible to everybody. Why? Why are we doing that? Let's stop it. Let's stop it as content developers, as designers, as technologists. It is not okay for technology not to be available to a young person with a disability, to a young woman with a disability. So let's stop deciding certain members of our society don't add value, because they do. And guess what? Technology is a great equalizer if we would bother to make it accessible. And I know that I sound angry. I don't want to sound angry. I'm a very optimistic, amazing person, but at the same time, technology, ICT, the internet, information, communications, and technology, it should be a gift to all humans, including humans with disabilities, including humans that are not born in developed countries, including young people that have something to say as young as 9 and 10 years old, that have brilliant things to say. So anyway, I think it all works better when every single person is valued and included. So thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. So you heard mine about, motherhood and youth inclusion. You heard, Deborah's call to make sure that we have, accessible solutions that we're creating. If you are the one creating a website, a mobile application, what are you doing to think about people who, might be colorblind, for example, or, might have hearing difficulty, or might not be able to hear at all, or might not be able to see at all. I'm a big fan of incorporating design thinking into everything that we do. If you've never taken a design thinking course, go out and do it. I will see if I can get a link to one of the opportunities. It's a free opportunity to gain access to a number of design thinking badges where you can learn about design thinking. For those of you who are not familiar with design thinking, it's a systematic process for resolving pain points by your customers. It's all about empathy. It's all about being customer or client-centered, customer-centered, and really enabling your customer to shine, to look at your products, services, solutions, whatever it is, and making sure that you're delivering upon your promise of resolving pain points, creating joys, helping them with their aspirations, what have you. So speaking of youth, instead of hearing me talk about what I thought it meant to, to be inclusive in the community, I'd love to pass it over to Kelly to talk about your connection to digital inclusion, and also, maybe some tips that you might have around thinking about how do you be truly inclusive when you are, rolling out any kind of program or platform that involves increasing digital inclusion.
I think when we look at inclusion, the first thing that comes to mind is really separating it from the standard diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion is usually the bucket that it's always in, but inclusion to me is very different than diversity. Diversity is really around to check off boxes to make sure you have a variety in a room, versus inclusion to me is more rooted in participation. So when we look at the 5 P's of SDGs, it's participation that's really the emphasis. And this really comes down to understanding, if you're creating a room and you're making sure people with lived experiences are there, are you really creating a space where they can equally participate and contribute and shape the ideas? And when it comes to youth, the best example is your token youth panel or your token youth advisory council, where at the end of the day, you have a group of like 10 youth maximum that are kind of brought in, and they're not really participating, because what will happen is the governing bodies or the organization will give them the predetermined ideas, the predetermined solutions, and then say, okay, give us your opinion on them, as opposed to actually involving young people in creating those solutions in the ideation process. And I think that's really the shift we need to see. It's when we actually create inclusive spaces where everyone's actually contributing and being part of the solution. That's when we create inclusive solutions that will last, and when we're really overcoming some of those access barriers that we talk so frequently about. We're kind of just building on what Deborah said. A good example, I love what you're saying about, Melissa, about design thinking and being cognizant of making sure that you're not alienating and leaving out communities with your products by building just for you and for those with your lived experience. The persons with disabilities make up over 10% of the population. It's a huge population and demographic that you're cutting out of your market if you're not considering that. Youth, on the other hand, there's almost 2 billion young people under the age of 30, and a large proportion of them are in developing countries who don't have the access that many of us have to technologies, but they're budding bright minds that I guarantee you have solutions to many of our challenges. What we need to do is build the bridges and pathways so they can tap into these resources, to the mind share and expertise, and be able to deliver their solutions and add those solutions to many of the projects that our communities, countries, and organizations are working on.
All right, super. So I was just typing away in the chat window as I was listening to Kelly. In the chat window, you have access to a link that will allow you to get 5 different badges. One is a practitioner, advocate, coach, co-creator, and leader. So if you're looking to build a community, understand your community, whether they're youth, whether they're people with disabilities, local communities, whatever it is, this is a great way. And it walks you through the process, and there are lots of different activities and things. And you can also get those badges you can share on social media, should you want to share with others and encourage them to do so as well. So with that, I think, as I think about inclusion, as I think about youth, and I think about community, Internet Society does just some amazing work with their youth ambassadors, but also really looking at community from a grassroots perspective. I love the work that the Internet Society does with the indigenous communities across, North America, for example. And I'm sure there's much more that you're doing that I'm not aware of. I've gotten so many insights on how to truly attack, if you will, these big wicked challenges that we have in local communities when we're trying to bring digital skills or connectivity or whatever it is. So Jane, I'd love to hear more about how does your work, or how do you specifically connect into the world of digital inclusion, and are there any kind of insights you'd like to share about how do you truly think about audience inclusion or local community inclusion?
Thank you, Melissa. And it's a really, really important question. And I spent most of my career on airplanes and being in communities. So for me, this is really weird not to be working with people on the ground all the time. But what I would say is the following. It really is about the local community and listening. And I know that sounds really simple, but it's listening to people who know way better than you do about a solution that's good for their community culturally. And you mentioned tribal communities, particularly with tribes. No matter where you are around the world, tribal communities are have very particular religious norms, cultural norms, and other issues that you may not expect or anticipate. And to assume that you know better than somebody who lives in a certain place is a very tricky thing to do. You will find yourself having to redo your entire project that you committed to work with them on. And again, it's joint, as Kelly was saying, it's co-creation, it's joint inclusion, it's joint development. It really is working from the ground with local communities to understand if they want you to come. We don't ever go anywhere we're not asked to go. We do a lot of networking so people know what we do. We have wonderful chapters around the planet. We have over 120 chapters. They're very individual chapters from country to country. It's what that chapter wants to be. Some are tech focused, some are policy focused, some may be human rights. The key thing for us is that we're listening to those local communities, co-creating and creating solutions so that the local sustainability is there. We never want to be the single point of failure as a partner. Ever. If you're building a partnership base, if you think of a pyramid, you want a huge broad base. And so often we'll go in, one of the, what I call the sort of formulas for success is to build as big a partnership, and you know that about me, Melissa, as possible, and bring in as many people. You have to put your ego aside. It's not about you. It's really about building more infrastructure, building the communities to support it. And for the technical community out there, I really do mean people who build technology and technical infrastructures, but also you have to have that network of people who know how to solve problems in country. And so a lot of what we do is focus on network operator group communities and building up technical expertise and training and making sure we're taking those people that are being trained and creating trainers. And so it really is important for local solution making. We've made some mistakes in the past, and I think some that I've made have been with some tribal communities in this country, in the United States, where I am right now, in assuming I understood where they were coming from because they were on the same piece of planet that I'm on or near. That's completely wrong. And you have to take a step back and just understand where they're coming from and what they need, and not try and impose what you think they need on the community. So setting expectations, listening, and actually understanding how to be successful in that situation that you're in to build the local sustainability.
So I don't know where all the time is went. I think that when I look at a panel and I've got such amazing, insights and people on the panel, we never get to all the questions we want to talk about. I think for me, I've given you kind of one thing to consider in terms of what's a framework that can help you be more inclusive. Design thinking. I think I'm going to give you one more, and then I'd like to ask our panelists about, what are some things, kind of some go-dos, if you will, maybe some actions that, or, things to consider, if you will. So for me, one of the big focus areas that I have right now is on building digital skills, building entrepreneurial spirit, boosting entrepreneurial spirit, and developing what I call habitudes, habits and attitudes. Combine those together to get habitudes, which is essentially soft skills, which I don't like that word. I don't even like professional development. I don't like personal development. I don't like anything in that. I like habitudes, but nobody ever knows what it means when I say it. So there you go. And I've created this kind of concept around how do I look at what are those skills that are necessary to prepare for the future of work. Last year, the IEEE put out a standard framework, the world's first standard definition for what it means to be digitally literate. If you haven't seen that, I'd go check it out. And I was part of creating that. I didn't create the framework itself, but the team to go and evaluate all the different frameworks that are out there. And we endorsed something called the framework from the DQ Institute. I'll put it in the chat window. I'm just going to grab it right now. So give me 1 second to grab it. And I'm going to put it up on my screen too. And it looks like we have until like 10:35 Eastern time. So we've got a little bit of a buffer, which is good. So I might keep y'all until the plenary session. So I'm going to put this in the chat window, dqinstitute.org. Why is this important? If we're not going out and agreeing upon a standard framework of what it means to encourage others to be digitally skilled, and if we're all over the place and teaching different things, how are we going to measure success if we don't agree upon what success is? If we don't agree upon what are the categories of skills, the competencies, if you will, that people need to have to be digitally literate, we're going to be everywhere and nowhere. And our metrics and our evaluation criteria will just not match up with reality, because you'll have a lot of different, players out there, whether it's our educational institutions, formal and informal, whether it's associations or people just trying to do the right thing. Everybody's mostly trying to do the right thing. But if you're not laddering up into kind of a standard framework of what this stuff means, we're going to be everywhere and nowhere. So I'm going to include that now. This is another great place to look. So again, this is all about if you're thinking about going out and digitally skilling folks. What does that mean? What does that mean exactly? So I'd love to maybe pass it over to Kelly now, and I'd love to say, just ask you about not only actions that I think our participants can take, but if you think about it as industry professionals, how can we do a better job, to incorporate youth into the digital economy? You've given us some insights, you've given us some things, but if you could say, I would do this one thing, what would be that one thing?
I think it's a two-part thing. First, I think we need to understand that everyone needs to be upskilled to participate in the digital economy, not just individuals who are pursuing technical fields of work and want to be engineers, software, and go into technical jobs. Digital literacy and digital skills transcend every field. If you're a marketer, you still need to know how to use digital tools just as much as, even if you're a writer, you're going to need to learn how to talk about the impacts of blockchain and all these things that are coming into play. Technology will span all fields. So that'd be the first thing. And then the second thing is, when we look at emerging technologies, I think we need to focus more on a lot of these new emerging economy topics that are not being brought into the school systems yet, like a blockchain, and how that's going to transform and reverberate across all industries when it comes to transparency, data ownership, and a lot of other concepts that, again, will affect our lives personally and professionally. So I would challenge industry to think about not just hard skills that you need for the job now, but what are these kind of emerging technology pins that are actually shifting the entire economy, that we need to be introducing concepts to young people. And two, how do we make digital literacy just like handwriting, where it's something everyone learns rather than isolating it to only those who are picking a specific pathway?
Super. And I love that, what you said about kind of the concept of, engineering. And I think that my perspective on this is that, not everybody's going to be an engineer. Not everybody's going to be a data scientist. Not everybody's meant to, go out and code. And I know that, there are lots of pushes to get people into computer science or into science, technology, engineering, and math, which I think is great. And I'm very supportive of. I think that everyone, no matter what you're going to be, no matter who you are, where you are, you should at least understand the basic building blocks of computer science. You should be able to understand, okay, here's what it means to code. You may not be going out there and, building the next best, tech company out there. And by the way, you don't have to be an engineer or data scientist to work in tech. But I do want there to be a world where, and I wish I could kind of go back and take this away, where the younger me, I look at the younger me. Yes, I'm not there anymore, but, or no, I'm not there anymore. But, I remember, being on my college campus and, walking into some, my computer science class, and I dropped it. Do you know why I dropped it? Because I felt like I didn't belong. And I have a couple of regrets in life. That is one of my regrets in life. And that's, not learning to code. Now I have the opportunity to work in tech. I manage engineers. I work with engineers. I have to be in very highly technical, meetings with CTOs and, very in your face technical people, where sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, because ultimately I can't code my way out of a cardboard box. But I also recognize that, regardless of what field I'm in, no matter where I'm at, I have to understand what AI is all about. I have to understand what machine learning is all about. I have to understand what role I play when it comes to learning some of these skills that are required for the future of work, so that I can, prosper, and that you can prosper, or a young boy in, Uganda, or a young girl in India, or whatever, all over the world. So speaking of, kind of, let's think about, all of the different things that we have going on around the world, the different projects that we've been involved in. Things don't always go as you plan, and sometimes things go terribly wrong. And you have great intentions. You mean for them to go well. You think you did all the research, but you didn't think about X, Y, and Z. I don't know, Jane, if you've got any war stories that you feel comfortable sharing. And I know it's hard. Like, how do I share my vulnerability? How do I share my failures? But do you have any projects that you would feel comfortable sharing, or any, example case studies to say, hey, we really screwed up. Here's where we screwed up. Here's why we screwed up. And here's why I would have done it differently had I had the opportunity.
Absolutely. And everyone makes mistakes. And if you don't allow that into your thinking as a manager or a person, you may not get very far, because mistakes have also led to great innovation. I'm going to use an example from another life that I had when I was working in Armenia to build a regulatory body. And one of the things that I noticed right away when I was in Armenia, in Yerevan, was that my counterparts did not have computers on their desks. They did not have phones at their desks, and they didn't have a PBX, or we put in 5, in the building they were in. And this was an oil, gas, electricity, water, and soon to be telecom regulator. So I was trying to work with them on some regulations, and decided that I needed them to be able to communicate with our team better. And I thought I knew better than them about the importance of having the infrastructure in the building for everyone. And what I didn't realize is that it was only the senior officials at that time, this was a long time ago, who were allowed to have the computers or the phones. So I sort of came in like a gangbusters and said, gosh, here's what you need. And they said, really? And I thought, oh, here we go. Because we had purchased the phones and the computers and the PBXs, and we had already mapped out with the technical people, not the senior officials, what we needed to do to wire the building and to get people connected. So that was almost a crash and burn, and we were able to save it by encouraging them to understand why it was important. it was still very, very difficult to be allowed to train the people on the staff, the 80-something people that needed the connectivity. And because they were doing all the work. We also had not built in the training program for the staff fast enough. So that was a big mistake. And so that was 15 years ago. I've learned a lot of lessons. I nearly had the head of the regulatory body just kick me out of the country, but we did save it. It's a lesson learned in making sure that, again, setting expectations, but also knowing your audience and ensuring that they understand what's in it for them, even if you're in a different space, in a different sort of structure, and it was way different power structure. And so we did succeed. And I will tell you that one day, one person said to me, "Why are you sending emails to somebody on a different floor in your building?" I said, "It's for efficiency." And they said, "Oh, we're running up and down with paper." This was 2006, 2005. And I said, "Gosh, there are ways we can fix that." So we did turn something that was not so fabulous into a success, but boy, was it painful along the way. And I would just say, really understand all the different layers in the bureaucracy and the organizations you're dealing with. I won't get into customs because that could have killed us on the equipment coming in, but that's a lesson for another day. But you do have to know all of the layers of the team that you're trying to work with and what the training for digital inclusion needs to be, because we really hadn't thought about redundancy also with the network systems operators. And so we quickly figured that out. Anyway, that was part of the story. It wasn't a horrific one, but it was a good lesson learned at that time.
Well, yeah, I can imagine some of the challenges that you ran into. I think as someone who spent, a lot of time, working with different cultures, different power structures, different views of hierarchy or inclusion or decision making, or, what it means to speak up. How do you speak up? Can you speak up? And, equally, I've been down a very interesting road myself when I, worked on a project where, we had defined, exactly where some equipment was going to go, and the equipment never ended up where it was supposed to go, and we never found out where the equipment went. And I think that's often a challenge when you are doing projects in many parts of the world where you have red tape and corruption and challenging scenarios where you think, okay, I'm connected, I've got a contract, it's very specific, and things just disappear and nobody can tell you where they went. I have heard many, many war stories about stuff like that. So I think including the right people, understanding the right, cultural elements about doing business is important, on the ground, and recognizing that you may think you understand a culture and the dynamics of that culture or community. And if you're coming in from the outside, the chances of you truly understanding are slim. And I think that's the importance of making sure that you've got local level involvement, whether that's at the government sector level, whether that's at the community level. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Takmil. We have 30 schools across rural Pakistan where we focus on out-of-school youth. We work with local community members to serve as mentors, if you will, and they learn to read. The young people learn to read and write and about math. All of the children are day laborers or child brides. And we are not necessarily trying to change some of the challenges that exist in society, but how do we arm them with at least the ability to read, write, and do math? And that's a hard thing to look at. So I'd love to maybe, switch it over to, I'd love to kind of switch it over to Samar now and think about tech skill building. Big passion of Samar's, both I think in her prior life before IBM and now in her Atlas Fellowship at IBM. So Samar, if you could maybe, talk about, maybe what our participants themselves or even their communities could do to better, kind of up their tech skills. Where are some places that people could go?
Thank you, Melissa. To begin with, for me, digital inclusion is something like really important. It's not a luxury nowadays. It's something basic. And having digital skills doesn't mean that you have to be a software engineer or a coder or a tech fellow, but it's required so you can evolve in your life. Like for now, if you don't know how to put a great resume on LinkedIn, you're gonna miss a lot of opportunities that you could have. Design thinking is really important, and like it's a skill that you can use in your own life, not like only in your work environment or professional speaking. And like the word nowadays is open source. So there are Coursera, there are Udemy, there are plenty of platforms, there are LinkedIn Learning, plenty of platforms that you can have access to, and there are and they are free. And you can upskill, you can evolve, and you can gain a lot of new skills for free. So you should only organize your time and allocate like in between 2, 4, 1 hour a week. What matters, like how many hours you are free and you can allocate. But this is really important. And with IBM, I just wanted to share with you, like with IBM, we are offering a lot of learning opportunities and courses for free for students in all over the world. You just have to subscribe, and like you can attend workshops, you can participate at tech hackathons, and you don't have to have a tech background to understand what's enterprise computing, for example, or how to do a design thinking, or like how to learn how to code in case you are passionate about coding. But I just wanted to share with you like why this is really important. And I've been working with youth and in tech like for 6 years right now, besides the fact that I'm a software engineer. Like all of the opportunities that I got in my life was thanks to digital inclusion, and thanks to the internet access, and thanks to the digital skills that I gained. Like one day I was back in my country, I was invited to share my experience with IEEE. And then I was sharing like a lot of tips on how to get these opportunities, and I figured out that only 15% of the people that I was addressing had internet access in their home. So I was shocked, and I didn't know how to pass the right information, how to give like the right tips when people don't even have internet access. So just by the fact like you have computer, phone, or internet, you really have an advantage because it's something basic. Like during the COVID, everybody used internet for banking transactions, for grocery shopping, for everything. So like digital skills is not only about professional work or enterprise computing or being a software engineer. Like it's really important for nowadays in all the fields. So I can share with you, if I may, a link to the IBMZ Student Hub in case
I already did it. It's already in the chat window.
Oh my God.
I can
Okay,
share it for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, super. You got that. I know we've got about 2 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we have a chance to do some final parting words. So I think we've heard a lot about youth inclusion. Obviously, gender inclusion is very, very important for all of us here on the panel. We've given you some a tool to help better kind of incorporate your audience, whoever that audience is, to identify their frustrations, pain points, who they are. And the best way for you to build a community that is able to make meaningful use of the internet is to include your community. How do you do that? Design thinking. All right. So I think I've belabored that point already. I'd love to just thank everyone for taking part in this panel. And I'd like to ask Jane, final parting words, 1 word, 2 words, short sentence. What is your 1 word, your words of advice?
Universal connectivity, we have to have it.
There you go, universal connectivity. Kelly, your final parting word or words?
Youth participation in decision-making.
Awesome, I love it. Deborah?
Accessibility, please, please, please. We need access to technology, please, accessibility. Please don't build anything that is not accessible to humans.
Super. And then Samar, your kind of final parting words.
Opportunities.
All right, super. So let's all go out and make meaningful use of the internet by involving our communities, by incorporating design thinking, by incorporating a standard framework when we're going out and teaching digital skills, so we're not everywhere and nowhere. My name is Melissa Sassy. I'm your chief penguin of IBMZ. I'm going to put my my Twitter handle in the chat, and I would encourage my other panelists to do the same thing. So.